There's a strange moment that happens in almost every human relationship. A moment when the conversation sounds normal, but something underneath it feels off. Someone smiles, yet the air feels heavy. Someone agrees with you, yet somehow you leave the conversation feeling smaller. You can't explain it logically, but your nervous system whispers something ancient. Something just happened here. Because beneath the surface of everyday conversations, beneath politeness, beneath compliments, beneath casual jokes, there exists a silent battlefield, a battlefield of hidden power games. And if you're watching this right now, chances are you've experienced it before. Maybe with a friend who always subtly competes with you. Maybe with a partner who makes you feel guilty for setting boundaries. Maybe with a coworker who pretends to support you while quietly undermining you. These moments leave you confused, not because they're obvious, but because the manipulation is invisible. It hides inside normal behavior, inside compliments, inside jokes, even inside silence. And here's the paradox. The same social intelligence that allows humans to cooperate also allows humans to manipulate. The same emotional awareness that builds trust can also be weaponized to control people. And the most disturbing truth of all, many people who play these power games don't even realize they're doing it. Because manipulation is not always a villain's strategy. Sometimes it's a survival strategy, a psychological playbook learned very early in life, a way of navigating the world when direct honesty once felt unsafe. So the real question is not simply, why are some people manipulative? The deeper question is this: why do humans play hidden power games at all? To understand that, we have to go deeper into the psychology of power. Manipulation is often imagined as something malicious, a calculated scheme, a dark personality trait. But psychology paints a far more complicated picture. At its core, manipulation is simply indirect control of another person's behavior. Instead of asking directly, the manipulator influences emotions, guilt, fear, doubt, even perception itself. To understand how this happens, we need to explore three psychological mechanisms that quietly shape human behavior. The first is called Machiavellianism. This concept comes from the political philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli, a man who studied power the way scientists study gravity. In psychology, Machiavellianism describes a personality pattern defined by three traits: strategic thinking, emotional detachment, and a focus on controlling outcomes. People high in Machiavellian traits often see relationships not as connections, but as games of influence, not necessarily because they are cruel, but because somewhere in their past, they learned a dangerous lesson: power equals safety. The second concept is something called social dominance orientation. Humans evolved inside tribal hierarchies. Every group naturally forms invisible status rankings. Some individuals compete for dominance, others cooperate. Those with strong dominance instincts often engage in subtle tactics to maintain influence. Compliments become currency, information becomes leverage, and silence becomes strategy. The third mechanism lies even deeper, inside the brain itself. It's called the default mode network. This is the brain system responsible for self-reflection, social imagination, and interpreting other people's intentions. It's the mental engine constantly asking questions like, what do they think of me? Why did they say that? What should I say next? This network allows humans to simulate entire social scenarios inside the mind, and when combined with insecurity or competition, it becomes a powerful strategic engine. People begin predicting reactions, anticipating weaknesses, adjusting behavior to subtly influence outcomes. In other words, manipulation isn't always deliberate. Sometimes it's simply social intelligence turned sideways, like a chess player who begins seeing every relationship as a chessboard. every conversation as a move, every emotional reaction as leverage. And once someone begins seeing the world this way, it becomes very difficult to stop. But here's the part people rarely talk about. Power games don't just damage the people being manipulated, they slowly poison the person playing them too. Because manipulation creates a very specific kind of loneliness, the loneliness of never being fully seen. When someone constantly controls how others perceive them, they must hide their real self, behind charm, behind strategic kindness, behind carefully calculated vulnerability. The psychologist Carl Jung once wrote something profound. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves, we discover in our neighbor. In other words, the traits we deny inside ourselves often appear in the people around us. Manipulative individuals often become experts at spotting others' weaknesses because they are deeply disconnected from their own. Every interaction becomes performance. Every relationship becomes strategy. Trust becomes dangerous. Authenticity becomes risky. And slowly, something tragic begins to happen. Real relationships become impossible because genuine connection requires something manipulators fear most: uncertainty. Real relationships cannot be controlled. You cannot predict every reaction. You cannot guarantee approval. So the manipulative strategy protects against rejection, but it also blocks intimacy. And beneath all these tactics lies a very old human fear: the fear of being powerless, the fear of rejection, the fear of being invisible. This is why manipulation often begins in childhood. When these patterns carry into adulthood, they rarely appear as obvious manipulation. They appear as personality, communication styles, habits. You might notice someone who gives compliments that secretly contain criticism. "You did great. I didn't expect that from you." You might meet someone who uses guilt as a control mechanism. "If you really cared about me, you would do this." You might encounter someone who creates confusion instead of clarity, something psychologists call gaslighting. They rewrite past conversations. They distort facts until you begin questioning your own perception. Some people manipulate through strategic vulnerability. They reveal just enough pain to gain sympathy, but never enough honesty to create real connection. Others manipulate through information control. They delay responses, they withhold details, they create uncertainty because uncertainty keeps them in control. In professional environments, manipulation often appears as reputation management. Someone praises you publicly while quietly undermining you privately. And perhaps the most subtle tactic of all is emotional mirroring. Manipulators quickly study what people want to hear, then they become exactly that: the perfect friend, the perfect partner, the perfect ally. But the version of them you see is carefully constructed, a psychological mirror designed to build trust quickly. But remember something important: these behaviors are not always personality traits. They are coping strategies, strategies built on a single belief. Direct honesty is dangerous. Unlearning this begins with something uncomfortable: seeing the pattern, not denying it, not justifying it, simply witnessing it. Because the moment manipulation becomes conscious, it begins losing its power. The path out of manipulation is not about becoming naive. It's about becoming whole. Wholeness requires something most power games avoid: vulnerability. True confidence does not come from controlling outcomes. It comes from accepting uncertainty, from speaking honestly, even when the result cannot be predicted. Psychologists call this process shadow work, facing the hidden parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. The jealous parts, the insecure parts, the parts that crave validation. When these parts remain unconscious, they manipulate, they compete, they sabotage relationships. But when they are acknowledged, they transform. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate."
Healing means learning to give yourself the safety you once tried to control from others, replacing strategy with honesty, replacing performance with presence, replacing competition with connection. Because the most powerful people in the room are rarely the ones playing games. They are the ones who no longer need them. They speak clearly. They set boundaries. They accept rejection without collapsing. And because of that, their influence becomes something deeper than manipulation. It becomes authentic power. So if you recognize these patterns in the world around you, or even inside yourself, remember this. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. The goal is not perfection. The goal is integration, to understand the darker mechanics of human behavior without becoming trapped inside them. Because the real secret of power games is this. The moment you see the game clearly, you are no longer just a player. You are finally free to step off the board. And that is where real power begins.